If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you gotta mean this. You gotta be desperate. This is no game. It's like, my life is not everything I want it to be, and perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean, my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attended upon, that is, make me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, homicidal, genocidal, unable to have a good relationship, prone to punish people for their virtue because of my jealousy, driving them proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. These are problems, man. And you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something, like, what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like you meditate on that. You will get an answer, and won't be one you want, but it'll be necessary one. And it's often something that will point you to small things. So Carl Jung said, people in the modern world do not see God because they do not look low enough. And so imagine you're in your messy bedroom and you're sitting on the edge of your bed trying to have an honest dialogue with yourself. And the little voice says, you know, it's pretty disgusting in here. And you think, well, I'm way above such trivial niceties as organizing my room. It's like, well, that's pride, that's arrogance. If you're above organizing what's actually yours, how in the world are you ever gonna organize anything else? And so you get on your knee and you think, well, it's time to take a brush to the toilet. And maybe that's where you start, and that works. You start making these micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real underground, actual micro improvement to think you know that are wrong. You will improve unbelievably rapidly. We deserve some respect. We deserve some respect. You're important to other people as much as to yourself. You have some vital role to play in unfolding destiny of the world. You are therefore morally obliged to take care of yourself. You should take care of, help, and be good to yourself the same way you would take care of, help, and be good to someone you loved and valued. You therefore have to conduct yourself habitually in a manner that allows you some respect for your own being, and fair enough. But every person is deeply flawed. Every one falls short of the glory of God. If that stark fact mean, however, that we had no responsibility to care of for ourselves as much as everyone would be brutally punished all the time. That would not be good. That would make the shortcomings of the world, which can make everyone who think honestly question very propriety of the world, worse in every way. That simply cannot be the proper path forward. To treat yourself as if you were someone you're responsible for helping is instead to consider what would be truly good for you. This is not what you want. It's also not what would make you happy. Every time you give a child something sweet, you make that child happy. That doesn't mean that you should do anything for children except feed them candy. Happy is by no means synonymous with good. You must get children to brush their teeth. They must put on their snowsuit when they go outside in the cold, even though they might object strenuously. You must help a child become a virtuous, responsible, awake being, capable of full reciprocity, able to care of himself and others, and to thrive while doing so. Why would you think it's acceptable to do anything less for yourself? You need to consider the future and think, what might me and render me productive and helpful so that I could shoulder my share of load and enjoy the consequences? Why should I be doing when I have some freedom to improve my health, expand my knowledge, and strengthen my body? You need to know where you are so you can start to chart your course. You need to know who you are so that you understand your element and bolster yourself in respect to your limitations. You need to know where you are going to so that you can limit the extent of chaos in your life, restructure order, and bring the divine force of hope to bear on the world. You must determine where are you going so that you can bargain for yourself so that you don't end up resentful, vengeful, and cruel. You have to articulate your own principles so that you can defend yourself against others taking inappropriate advantage of you, and so that you're secure and safe while you work and play. You must discipline yourself carefully. You must keep the promise you make to yourself and reward yourself so you can trust and motivate yourself. You need to determine how to act forward and toward yourself so that you're most likely to stay a good person. It would be good to make the world a better place, heaven, heaven, after all, will not arrive at its own accord. We will have to work to bring it about and strengthen ourselves so that we can understand the deadly angels and flaming sword that God used to bar its entrance. Do not underestimate the power of vision and direction. These are irresistible forces, able to transform what might appear to be an unconquerable obstacle into traversable pathways and expanding opportunities. Strengthen the individual. Start with yourself. Take care of with yourself. Define who you are. Refine your personality. Choose your destination and articulate your being. As the great 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche so brilliantly noted, he whose life has a why can bear almost any how. You could help direct the world on its carried trajectory a bit more toward heaven and a bit more away from the hell. Once having understood hell, research it, so to speak, particularly your own individual hell. You could decide against going there or creating that. You could aim elsewhere. You could in fact devote life to this. That would give you a meaning with a capital M. That would justify your miserable existence. That would atone, go for your sinful nature and replace your shame and self-consciousness with the natural pride and forthright confidence of someone who has learned once again to walk with God in the garden. You could begin by treating yourself as if you were someone you were responsible for helping. You're gonna have to put some effort into your life. You need to be motivated to do that. And so, what are your potential resources of motivation? You could think about them in the big five manner. If you're extroverted, you want some friends. If you're agreeable, you want an intimate relationship. If you're disagreeable, you want to win competitions. If you're open, you want to engage in creative activity. If you're high narcissism, you want security. Okay, so those are all sorts of potential motivation that you could draw on. You could tailor to your own personality. But then there are dimensions you want to consider your life across. And so we ask people about, well, if you could have your life with the way you want it in 3 or 5 years, if you were taking care of yourself properly, what would you want from your friendship? What would you want from your intimate relationship? What would you like to structure your family? What would you want from your career? Well, how are you going to use your time outside your job? And how are you going to regulate your mental and physical health? And maybe also your drug and alcohol use, because that's a good place to go down, because alcoholism, for example, wipes out 5 or 10% of people. So you want to keep that under control. So maybe you develop a vision of what you would like your life to be, and that associated with your life. So once the goal is established, and then you break down the goal into micro processes that you can implement, the micro processes become rewarding in proposition in relationship to their casual association with the goal, and that tangles in your incentive reward system. We talked about the dopaminergic incentive reward system, and that's the thing that keeps you moving forward, and that's the way it works. That it works better if it produces positive emotion when it can see you moving toward valued goal. Okay, well, what's the application of that? Better have a valued goal, because otherwise you cannot get any positive motivation working out. And so the more valuable the goal in principle, the more associated with that goal start to take on a positive charge. And so what it means is, well, you get up in the morning and you're excited about the day. You're ready to go. And so as far as I can tell, what you do is you specify your long-term ideal. Maybe you also specify a place you want to stay the hell away from, so that you are terrified to fail as well as excited about succeeding, because that's also useful. You specify your goal. You do that in some sense as a unique individual. You want to specify goals that make you say, oh, if that could happen as a consequence of my effort, it would clearly be worthwhile. Because the question always is, why do something? Because doing nothing is easy. You just sit there and you do not do anything. That's real easy. The question is, why would you ever do something? And the answer is that has to be because you've determined by some means that is worthwhile. And the next question might be, well, where should you look for a worthwhile thing? And one would be, well, you could consult your own temperament. And the other would be, well, you look at what people accrue that's valuable across the lifespan. So you do a structural analysis of the subcomponents of human existence, and already did it. You need a family, you need friends. You don't need, and you don't have to have all the things, but you better have most of them. family, friends, career, educational goals, plans for the lifetime outside your work, attention to your mental and physical health, etc. This is what life is about, and if you don't have any of those things, well, then all you've got left is misery and suffering, so that a bad deal for you. It was easier for people to be good at something when more of us lived in a small rural communities. Someone could be homecoming queen, someone else could be spelling bee champ math wits, or basketball star. There were only one or two mechanics and a couple of teachers in each of their domains. These local heroes had the opportunity to enjoy the serotonin-filled confidence of the victor. It may be for that reason that people who were born in small towns are statistically overrepresented among the eminent. If you are 1 in a million now, but originate in modern New York, there is 20 of you. And most of us now live in the cities. What's more, we have become digitally connected to the entire 7 billion. Our hierarchies of accomplishment are now dizzyingly vertical. No matter how good you are at something or how you rank your accomplishments, there is someone out there who makes you look incompetent. You're a decent guitar player, but you're not Jimmy Page or Jack White. You're almost certainly not even going to write your local pub. You're a good cook, but there are many great chefs. Your mother's recipe for fish, heads, and rice, no matter how celebrated in her village of origin. It doesn't cut it in these days of grapefruit foam or scotch tobacco ice cream. Some mafia down his take or react. Some obsessive CEO has more complicated self-winding watch kept in his more valuable mechanical handward and, well, still automatic self-winding watch case. Even the most stunning Hollywood actress eventually transforms into Devil Queen, an eternal paranoid watch for the new Snow White. And your career is boring and pointless. Your housekeeping skill are second-rate. Your taste is appealing. You're fatter than your friends, and everyone treats your parties. Who cares if you're Prime Minister of Canada when someone else is the President of the United States? Inside us dwells a critical internal voice and spirit that knows all this. It's predisposed to make its noisy case. It condemns our mediocre effort. It can be very difficult to quell words. Critics of it's sort of necessary. There is no shortage of tasteless artists, countless musics, poisonous cooks, bureaucratically personality, disordered middle managers, hack novelists, and tedious ideology, written professors. Things and people differ importantly in their qualities. Awful music torments listener everywhere. Poorly designed builders crumble in earthquake. Substandard automobile kill their drivers when they crash. Failures is the price we pay for standards, and because mediocrity has consequences, both real and harsh, standards are necessary. We're not equal in ability or outcome, and never will be. A very small number of people produce very much of everything. The winners do not take all, but they take most, and the bottom is not a good place to be. People are unhappy at the bottom. They get sick there and remain unknown, unloved. They waste their life there. They dive there in consequences. The self-denigrating voice in the mind of people waves devastating tale. Life is a zero-sum game. Worklessness is the default condition. What but willful boundless could possibly shelter people from such a withering criticism? It's for such a reason that a whole generation of social psychologists recommended positive illusion as the only reliable road to mental health. Their credo, let a lie be your umbrella. A more dismal, wretched, pessimistic philosophy can hardly be imagined. Things are so terrible that only delusion can save you. Here is an alternative approach, and one that requires no illusion. If the cards are always stacked against you, perhaps the game you're playing is tomorrow. Rigid, perhaps you unbeknownst to yourself. If the internal voice makes you doubt and the value of your endeavors of your life or life itself, perhaps you should stop listening. If the critical voice within you says some denigrating things about everyone, no matter how successful, how reliable it can be, maybe it's comments to chatter, not wisdom. There will be always the people better than you. That's a cliche of nihilism. Like the phrase, in a million years, you're gonna know the difference. The proper response to that statement is not, well, then everything is meaningless. It's any idiot can choose a frame of time within which nothing matters. Taking yourself into irrelevance is not a profound critic of being. It's a cheap trick of the rational mind. Pick up your damn suffering and bear it, and try to be a good person so you don't make it worse. Well, that's the truth. I read a lot about the terrible thing that people have done to you, each other. You just cannot even imagine it. It's so awful. So you don't want to be someone like that. Now, do you have a reason to be? Yes, you have lots of reason to be. God, there is reason to be resentful about your existence. Everyone, is going to die, you too. And there is gonna be fair bit of the pain along the way, and lots of it's gonna be unfair. It's like, yeah, no wonder you're resentful. It's like, act it out and see that what happens. You make everything you're complaining about infinitely worse. There is this idea that hell is bottomless pit, and that's because no matter how bad it is, some stupid like you could figure out a way to make it a lot worse. So you think, well, what do you about that? Well, you can accept it. That's what life is like. It's suffering. That's what the religious people have always said. Life is suffering, yes. Well, who wants to admit that? Well, just think about it. Well, so what do you do in the face of that suffering? Try to reduce it. Start with yourself. What good are you? Get yourself together for Christ's sake, so that when your father dies, you're not winding away in a corner and can help plan the funeral, and you can stand up solidly so that people can really rely on you. That's the better. Don't be a damn victim. Of course, you're a victim, Jesus. Obviously, put yourself together, and then maybe if you put together, you know how to do that. You know what they're wrong with you if you admit it. There is a few things you could polish up a little bit that you might even be able to manage in your insufficient present condition. And so you might shine yourself up a little bit. And then how do you overcome the suffering of life? Is be a better person? That's how you do it. Well, that's hard. It takes responsibility. And I think you said to someone, you want to have a meaningful life. Everything you do matters. That's the definition of a meaningful life. Everything you do matters. You're gonna have to carry that with you. Or do you want just forget about your whole meaning thing, and then you don't have to any responsibility, because who the hell cares? You can wander through life doing whatever you want, gratifying impulsive desire for how useful that's gonna be, and you're stuck in meaninglessness, but you don't have any responsibility. Which one do you want? Well, ask yourself, which one are you pursuing? And you will find very rapidly that it's not the majority of the soul that's pursuing the whole meaning thing, because, well, look, what you have to do that, you have to take on the fact that life is suffering. You have to put yourself together in the face of that. It's my own period of darkness in the underworld of the soul. I find myself frequently overcome and amazed by the ability of people befriend each other, to love their intimate parents and partners and children, and to do what they must to keep the machinery of the world running. I knew a man injured and disabled by the car accident who was employed by local Unity. For years after he crashed, he worked side by side with another man who, for his part, suffered with a degenerative neurological diseases. They cooperated while repairing lines, each making up the other inadequacy. This every heroism is the rule, I believe, rather than the exception. Most individuals are dealing with one or more serious health problem while going productively and uncommonly about their business. If anyone is fortunate enough to be the rare period of grace member of crisis, yet people prevail and continue to difficult and effectful task to hold themselves and their families and society together. To me, this is miraculous. So much so that a damn-founded gratitude is the only appropriate response. There are so many ways that things can fall apart or fail to work altogether, and it's always wounded people who are holding together. They deserve some genuine and heartful admiration for its ongoing miracle of fortune and perseverance. In my clinical practice, I encourage people to credit themselves and those around them for acting productively and with care, as well as for the genuine concern. concern and thoughtfulness, they manifest toward each other. People are so tortured by the limitation and constraint of being that amazed that ever act poorly to look beyond themselves at all. But enough do so that we have central heat and running water and infinite computational power and electricity, and enough for everyone to eat, and even the capacity to contemplate the fate of border society and nature, terrible nature itself. All of that complex machinery that protects us from freezing and starving and dying and lack of water tends insensitively toward malfunction through entropy. It's only the constant attention of careful people that keeps it working so unbelievably well. Some people degenerate into hell of resentment and hatred of being, but most refuse to do so because despite their suffering and disappointment and losses and inadequacy and ugliness, and again, that's a miracle for those with the eye to see it. Humanity in total and those who compose it as identifiable people deserve some sympathy for appealing burden under which the human individual genuinely staggers, some sympathy for subjugation and mortal vulnerability, tyranny of the sage, and depredation of the nature. It's existential situation that no more animal encourage or endures, and one of the severities such as it would take a god to fully bear it. It is the sympathy that should be proper medicament for your self-confidence, self-contempt, which has its justification, but it's only half and the full and proper story. Hatred for self and mankind must be balanced with gratefulness for tradition in the state and astonishment at what normal everybody people accomplish, to say nothing of the staggering achievement of the truly remarkable. I had a rule with my client because you might say, well, I've gone halfway path down this path and I found it's wrong. How do you distinguish that from just giving up? Well, that's really hard question. It's moral hazard because it's inappropriate to continue in a direction realize to be wrong, but it's also inappropriate to give up and use that realization as existence and excuse. And how do you distinguish it, right? Exactly, so that it's genuinely a moral hazard. So one of the principles that I tried to abide by in my therapeutic discussions was you can change course as long as next thing you do is equally and more difficult, because that's against just giving up. So you want to discipline yourself so that you can get yourself organized, so that you can go in the particular direction, so that when you find the right direction you can really go in that direction, and that does require an apprenticeship of sorts, and it might not matter in some sense exactly what the apprenticeship is as long as it's rigorous. And so that's bridge between moral relativism and moral absolutism. There is a lots of games you can play. It's not that obvious a priori, which is the best game. That's moral relative stance. That's multiple playable games, but then the absolute is, but you have to play one of them. You have to learn to play one of them. You have to become an extent, at least one of them. And then that's not a relative proposition. And I believe that's true. That seems to me to be C. So you want to commit to something. And then when you commit to something, you require yourself to bring all of your disparate components moving in a single direction, united in a single direction. So it's unifying act. And then once having been unified, well, then you can bring that unity to bear on a variety of different tasks, but you have to bring it together first and then make these things developmentally. You see, children start out in the disparate bundle of motivation and emotions, warning with one another, and then they can integrate that into single games that they can play with themselves, and then they integrate that with games they start to play with other people, and all of that is integration. It's not subjugation, it's not respiration, not if it's a good game, it's interrogation. You want to get integrated because then you have all the horses that are pulling your carrot, pulling in the same direction, and you're much more likely to get to where you want to go then, and also much more likely to specify a good place to go. So that something else conservatives have to teach young people, which is, well, get yourself disciplined. Well, why? Well, not so you're slave, but you could be a master, to use terminology that you're not supposed to use anymore, but this is relationship to yourself, not to others.